period after the morning tea break. Our next submitter is Suky Thompson. So Suky, good morning. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the table. Now, Suky is presenting on behalf of two different groups. So the first group is the Banks Peninsula Native Forest Climate Change Group. So Suky, there are two submissions for this one, which add up to a total of 10 minutes. So if we do those two first, and I'm happy just to give 10 minutes, and how you use that 10 minutes across the two submissions is entirely your choice. And then we'll move to the submissions from the Rod Donald Trust. So if we can start with 10 minutes from the Banks Peninsula Native Forest Climate Change Group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you, councillors, for having us to present today. With me is Bob Webster, also a member of the Banks Peninsula Native Forest Climate Change Group. Now, this group is an informal collaboration of experts from a whole range of organisations. We've listed those organisations on the front of our submission. You'll notice that there are staff from CCC and ECAN involved with the group. They have not been involved with preparing these submissions to the long-term plan and your own climate change strategy. The aim of the group is to find ways to incentivise a change in marginal land use from farming to native forest, in particular through improvements to the emissions trading scheme, so that setting aside land for carbon sequestration in native forest becomes a financially viable alternative to pastoral farming and rotational exotic forestry. And we want to expand the current situation where these activities are only carried out by government organisations or private philanthropists to actually be an economic use in their own right. And we see Banks Peninsula as offering real low-hanging fruit because it has so much marginal land on it that is suitable for native forest and that is just naturally regenerating if it's allowed to get on with it. So we have made substantial submissions already to the Emissions Trading Scheme and the Climate Change Commission draft advice to try and remove some of the systemic barriers that are sitting there preventing private landowners from just putting all this marginal land into the Emissions Trading Scheme. And where we see the council coming in now is that the Climate Change Commission in its draft advice has made it clear that work must start now for this transformation and the lasting changes needed across society. And it's identified that permanent native forest has got a really important role in reducing those carbon or absorbing those carbon emissions that we cannot reduce to zero. So our position is that we very strongly support your climate change strategy that you've developed, and in particular Program 5, Carbon Removal and Natural Restoration. And we see that harvesting this low-hanging fruit on Banks Peninsula would be a real win-win for biodiversity, climate change, and the economy, and a way for you to start enacting your climate change strategy right away. And we need that action now because forests take time to grow, and if they're going to be effectively sequestering as much of our residual emissions as possible by 2050, they need to be at their peak absorption capacity by then, which means they need to get going now. And what we focused on our submission is low-cost ways that you can make big gains through supporting initiatives that are already underway. This can occur now. It doesn't need the council to do further strategy work. So this is why we've tied together our climate change strategy and our LTP strategy, because what we're saying to you is get on with implementing that climate change strategy in your LTP right now. The way that we see Program 5 can start to be being really easily implemented just at the stroke of a pen here at this table is by increasing the funding for the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, our sister organisation that works with private philanthropic landowners to assist them to set aside land for conservation. We've asked for an extra $50,000 operating costs for the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust. We've also asked for $60,000 for the pest-free Banks Peninsula. Keeping pests down in these naturally regenerating areas really helps the growth of the forest and therefore the sequestration. We do note that the pest-free Banks Peninsula group asked for a bigger amount than that, and we would change our submission to reflect what they have asked for. We're also asking for the Biodiversity Fund to be increased. Now, this is the one that helps private landowners principally with fencing. It's very efficiently used with the Conservation Trust and the QE2 Trust working together on how it's allocated out. And it's held up in your own climate change strategy as an example of something that's already happening now. So we're a bit upset when we open the LTP to find that this precious fund, which is a very small amount of only 200,000 a year anyway, is actually being cut to 190. What kind of signal is that sending? So what we're saying is, actually, we want you to double the original value of that, bring it up to 400k per year. This would enable the covenanting organisations to process a lot more covenants through a lot faster. So those are things you can do to help initiatives that are already going on. And the final thing we're asking is to set aside funds for the acquisition of land. There are large blocks of land out there on Banks Peninsula that could be grabbed now or grabbed when they come on the market that would provide sequestration opportunities for Christchurch City and for Christchurch City Council, that would also support your biodiversity aims. You just need to be in a position to be able to buy them. If you think it's too complicated or difficult for the council to buy them, then we see the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust as a very effective vessel to funnel those funds to, because it is nimble enough to be able to deal with things like deadline sales, where you have to get an offer in, you know, within a 4-week period, which is something that's beyond what the council can probably do. And we didn't put a figure in our submission, but we just said, look, what if you put aside $500,000 per year into this fund? That would allow at least 1,000 extra hectares to be added to that conservation estate over the next 10 years. And we would be aiming to buy blocks, or we're asking you to aim to buy blocks where natural regeneration is already underway, because it is just so much more effective for landscape scale afforestation to harness the power of nature, as has been done at Henawai, than to start running around planting. Planting's great for community groups and small plots of land, but not for landscape scale change. And what we're saying is, if you're outsourcing the work with grants to community organisations, it's not putting an extra burden on council staff. It's not difficult to do. All you've got to do is increase those figures. And we have worked out, and this is, you know, these are pretty rough figures, but we've worked out that what we've asked for would increase your LTP budget by 0.6%, and that includes squirreling away that money for land acquisition as well. So we submit these are very minor budget changes that would enable you to start delivering on your climate change strategy right away. You'll be able to answer those people who completed the survey and say, yeah, we are doing something right now. So thank you. Open for questions.
All right, thank you very much indeed. So that does leave almost 3 minutes for questions. Are there questions for Suky on these matters? All right, so no questions. Thank you very much indeed. Is there anything else that you wanted to add with the time that you've got left available?
I could just add that I think it sort of seems to me like there's a machine here already to get some of the outcomes that your council wants in terms of, and the community wants in terms of ecological restoration and protection and carbon sequestration. And you've got the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust and the Rod Donald Trust here set up specifically achieving those objectives which the council has got. All you need to do is put the money in, press the button, and it's happening. So it's not a big not a big outlay in terms of work within the council to achieve these things.
All right, thank you very much indeed. So now let's move on, Suky.